Welcome, everyone, to the Motorsport Show. Phil Branagan and Gerald McDornan here for your company, and thanks for tuning in. It's bloody cold in Melbourne, Phil.
What are you wearing? A T-shirt?
A shirt, yeah.
I feel like I've just left the ski fields down here in Melbourne. 6 degrees feels like 2 here in eastern suburbs of Melbourne. Hope it's warmer where you are. Hope you've got the heater on if you're somewhere cold like we are.
Oh, but we had the pizza guy come over and drop us some pizzas before for dinner for Rob and the boys outside, and his car had actually been snowed on just before.
In the suburbs of Melbourne.
In the suburbs of Melbourne. Unbelievable.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started on the weather in Melbourne. But, hey, that's why we live here, because why do we live here? Oh, it's the motor racing heartland of something, the world.
Well, it's 200 kilometres away from the motor racing heartland of the world, Philip. Winton Motor Raceway, of course.
Don't we know it?
That kicked off an incredible week of motorsport.
It was the last weekend in May is always the big one for motorsport here in Australia, anywhere in the world, and it was great to be at Winton Raceway on the weekend and see some great cars going around, and then go home and watch everything else on TV.
Which
you did.
Yeah.
Didn't pull an all-nighter?
No, I did get up for Indianapolis, of course. I didn't want to. I wanted to watch Monaco, but a bit too predictable so far this year.
The good thing about Monaco this year is
staying up.
Watch 4 laps, go to bed. There wasn't a lot going on. It was close. It's Monaco. It's Monaco. That's what it's like. We'll talk about that a little bit later on.
And we're also going to talk on today's show with you, the fans, as well, because please use Facebook, interact with us. You can send in your questions.
You can do that on Facebook.
Already Scotty Hallinan has sent something in saying, hopefully tonight you'll be talking about the shortcut that was made at Winton on supercars. To me, that's cheating.
Oh, I'm sorry. Look, the light was on. I was driving out of the circuit. The guy said, go through the gate. That's my fault. I'm sorry. It's one of those things. We'll be talking about Scotty Mack and the performance of the DJR Team Penske Shell team a little bit later on. But
we will.
And that shortcut.
And we're going to talk Indy 500 as well. Yep. And Charlotte NASCAR, the world of motorsport at Winton. Big, huge show coming up. But as we said, please don't be shy and send your comments and also your questions into us. And we'll try and give you a little bit of insight. For those that don't actually know, one of the questions we had at the last show, Philip, was, who are we?
Who are you?
Exactly.
I've been asking you that question for 25 years.
Phil and I have worked together for nearly 30 years, originally at the Calder Park Thunderdome, where we were announcers, and we worked together at Motorsport News. Phil was there for a long time. I was there.
They couldn't get rid of me.
I was there for 5 years full-time, but 7 or 8 years total. I went off to do Holden Motorsport PR with Tim Pemberton, and then for a decade by myself as a contractor to Holden. And while you, Phil, you stayed at Motorsport News. And
I liked it there. It was very comfortable. I had a nice chair. There were some nice young people I worked with, including Chris Lambton. Stayed there until 2012 and freelanced for a couple of years, and then we brought Auto Action back from the dead 2016 thanks to Bruce Williams and Mike Emery. I was the editor there for almost 2 years, left there 12 months ago, and now work for Motorcycle News. So
it's fair to say that we've been to a couple of races. We've spent most of our lives, our adult lives at racetracks.
Don't want to think about the first adult life. Yeah, the first time I went to a motor race, sat in the grandstand at Sandown, 1972. And what my first role in motor racing outside of sitting in the grandstand was actually being a track marshal, being an official, and a volunteer official at that. So if you've ever thought about making a start in motor racing and wanting to put something into the sport, it's a good place to start. Be a volunteer marshal.
Absolutely.
Now look at me.
It's like being an umpire in a football.
Everybody needs to do it.
You cop abuse. Some of them get run over by John Bow. Sorry, John.
It wasn't us. Hello, Dale Rogers, if you're watching. What are we talking about tonight, G?
What are we talking about? That's a bloody good question. Well, we're talking about Winton. Thought, though, that I would start off, Philip, with a fantastic, it's been a week of sensational motorsport
worldwide
achievements.
It has.
And I don't think there's anything bigger than our first little clip, as we've got Robbie over there.
Yeah, Indy? No? Isle of Man? No? What?
Jam.
What?
Monster Jam.
What?
Monster Jam. Had to have a look at this. I thought this was fantastic. Here we go. Toddler Duck at the Monster Jam World Finals, 144-foot jump in a monster truck.
What's that in metres or Celsius?
Have a look at this. So, a little bit of slow-mo here. Have a look. Have a look at the yield and the altitude and his guy rating.
His guy rating. That's because he's male. Otherwise, he'd be lady rating.
Oh, yeah.
Monster trucks.
Have a look at this. It is fantastic. No, we didn't guy rate on this one.
No.
So I'm probably getting ahead of myself there, but
a
little bit different.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at clip number 2, though, Robbie.
There's another one?
If that wasn't enough, here is how Leduc actually ended up at the show. Now, this is guy rating.
That is guy rating. That is some first-class work in monster trucks. While we're at it, let's send a cheerio to Grant Daniel if you're watching there in Bathurst. Hi, Grant. A man who knows about monster trucks and who was very, very fortunate. We're not making light of his injuries, but monster trucks, great entertainment when they go right or left.
Absolutely fabulous. When
they go right.
I tell you what, they could teach a few other motorsport
no
series
names.
A lesson with
no names. Be nice.
Crowds, etc. Oh, mate, it's a wide brush.
Yeah, it is.
When you're talking entertainment.
Hey, it's all motorsport. It's all motorsport.
Absolutely. Now let's start with the main stuff. And we've got David Driscoll's here. What about Reynolds cutting off at Hidden Valley or Bright at Sydney Motorsport Park? Was it at Sydney Motorsport Park?
TCR? Yeah.
No. Cutting the track. I forget where Bridie did it. But Reynolds, yes, it was in the rules.
Let us know, Bridie. Send me a message.
And Jason Barguana, who was the driving steward, did say in 2016 that they were sharpening up that rule and they weren't going to be allowed to do it. But don't get stuck in the Scotty McLaughlin.
No.
He's the only bloke that read the rule. Not cheating. And just
we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think we'll have some vision. But
we'll talk about that later.
And it was controversial at the time. Things like that are always going to bring comments, and people should have passion about what they're watching, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, he read the rule book.
Let's go to Charlotte. Let's start the show by starting with the motorsport that ended the weekend of racing. Charlotte Motor Speedway for the Coca-Cola 600. We'll roll the tape. And huge crowd on hand and a great field of cars, as always, at Charlotte. Talk about the Thunderdome. It's the Thunderdome was modelled on Charlotte, the 24-degree bank turns, and a couple of early crashes. Now, here is the eventual race winner, Martin Truex Jr., sticking it in early and got himself into a little bit of trouble there. He could have ended his day. But such is the thing in NASCAR, people come back. Brad Keselowski, can anyone stop Penske's having a winning weekend?
No, I predict not. I think last weekend I'll predict they won everything.
So Keselowski won stage 1. There he comes back and he wins stage 2 as well. What about the Miller Lite car? Looks fantastic. But when the big stuff happened and the 600... It's the long night. It starts in the late afternoon. The number one gets a little bit out of shape there, and there's a bit of action going on in the NASCARs. Big crash there, of course. Took out a number of the cars. And it's not NASCAR unless we see a good bit of biff and budge and Rubbins racing. But there goes Keselowski. All his stage 1 and 2... all came for naught there, brought out the yellows, and the number 2 Miller Lite Ford Mustang was then out of contention. But what about this, Phil? On the last restart, they're going 4 wide.
Yep. Typical of Charlotte, everyone jockeying for position.
And just a mad dash. And here we go. What about that? The Pennzoil Shell Mustang. Oh, my God, battling for the lead. But Martin Truex Jr., here he goes, holds on to win the Coca-Cola 600. And what a fantastic victory. And, of course, James Small again, engineering over there with Truex and the Joe Gibbs team. And so that is umpteen wins for Joe Gibbs and also Penske's during the year. And Chevy just snuck in for a couple of wins.
Yep. And look, it's even competition over there in NASCAR. They have similar discussions every time one brand wins. Someone else will say something, usually one of the fans, but that's the way it is in NASCAR. There'll be adjustments along the way.
But it's actually been pretty good racing so far this year, and a lot of fans are actually recognising that. They've made some aero adjustments to the cars, and it has brought some of the racing back together, and it's pretty good. But it is definitely Penske and Joe Gibbs Racing doing all the winning this year.
Sure is.
Oh, and David Driscoll says he believes that we'll be cheering on Scotty McLaughlin in NASCAR racing in a couple of years' time.
You're not the first person to ask that, David. There has been some discussions. I did ask some people on the weekend what they thought Scott was going to be doing. Of course, let's not forget. Well, we'll get on to supercars. Let's talk about supercars. If we're going to talk about supercars and Scott McLaughlin, let's talk about supercars.
Let's talk about supercars, and let's roll the videotape, Robbie. And, of course, Mustang again, 2 wins. Races 13 and 14 at Winton Motor Raceway, the motorsport capital of the world. And if the action happened in the first race, Philip, on the Saturday, very controversial. The opening lap with the Shell Mustangs.
If all the racing was like it was in the first 2 laps at Winton, everybody would watch supercars all the time. Look at this now. Just hold your breath, everybody. Here go the 2 Shell V-Power Mustangs into turn number 5. There's a touch.
Fabs gets a little light, gives his teammate a helping hand off.
And
Scotty pulls out the rule book, has a look, just checks, drives across.
And gets back on at turn 8. Now, that was what people were talking about, but that was perfectly legitimate. He got back and redressed the situation and went all the way back to third place, just to be sure.
He's nearly cleaned up mustard on the way. Davey Reynolds. Now, he had a nice little tap. Huh? You're kidding. We're seeing that we're seeing some video blocked. No way.
Okay.
We still going?
Okay, sorry about that, folks. We had a technical problem with our video, about which I know nothing, I'm afraid.
Oh, yeah, okay, we're okay. There you go. Let's try it again. Robbie, let's roll it again. No, we're not rolling it again. Let's roll the next one. Number 14. We are showing this as news. We are a news source.
Anyway, okay.
Yep.
We can't show you the video.
So, race 13, of course, the Mustangs. We spoke about that, but what about the penalties that got handed out? Fabian got a penalty for turfing Scotty off.
Yep.
And David Reynolds got 5 seconds for turfing James Courtney off.
And there was a lot of talk afterwards that if it's fighting for position and it's another team, that maybe the penalty should be higher. And look, that's one of those things that's always controversial. We've already covered the McLaughlin penalty. There are referees in this sport, and people are going to agree with them, and people are not going to agree with them. And the decision was handed down, and that's the way it went on Saturday at Winton Motor Raceway. The important thing was that McLaughlin won, and he carried on his winning ways on Sunday. I'm guessing we can't go to that video either. Nope. Okay, all right, so we'll just talk about it. Scott won.
Who's blocking us? Is it Supercars? What a pack of arseholes, seriously. What a pack of arseholes. No wonder the series is going shithouse. If that's the case, Philip, I know you're not going to say anything.
No, I'm not going to say anything.
But can I explain? There's a very clear law that says if you are using stuff for a news source, which we're doing, as a news source to show what happened and discuss the action, we are branding it the Vision Supercars. The law says under fair dealings, we are allowed to use it.
Well, there's nothing we can do about it at the moment.
We're not showing a friggin' race. We're showing a couple of highlights that are readily available online, which we're streaming from, and they're blocking us.
Okay, well, look, there's nothing we can do about it at the moment, is there?
Oh, no, we can give them a serve. That's absolutely ridiculous.
All I can say is it's disappointing from this point of view. I've read it, and anyway, look, we'll move on.
Tell us what you think, people.
Yeah.
We'd be interested to hear your thoughts, because I am really annoyed about that. It's let's go to Indy Lights, Robbie. And
are we going to go back to Supercars later on?
No.
Okay, we won't. We'll go to Indy Lights. Take it away for Indy Lights.
Indy Lights. Now, what about the the race leading up. This is on Carb Day, one of the great races. Fantastic Carb Day at Indianapolis weekend, the 500 weekend, and a super close race decided by bugger all, in fact. And it was Oliver Askew just sneaking past for the win. Michael Andretti and the Andretti boys looking very happy. But Phil, this happens just every year, and last year I think it was 4 cars. Back in 2013 we saw 3 cross the line like this. But this is what exciting motor racing's all about. Last lap, bit of a charge, just a nose in it.
They just keep on coming up with Indy Lights, and it's proved to be a great proving ground. Colton Herter came out of that series, and look what he's done so far in Indy cars in his rookie season. Oliver Askew winning that race. Let's keep an eye on him. Andretti, Autosport, once again stepping up in May.
Doing a fantastic job in May. So the win there in the Indy Lights, they went very close in the 500. Didn't do too good at Winton Motor Raceway. Not James Courtney's fault, though. He certainly should have been on the podium, and Beardo has actually admitted that, Craig Baird. Should have been on the podium. He got the mistake, the penalty wrong, and then he got knocked off in Sunday's race as well.
And while we're talking about Winton, and we can't show you some of the highlights, unfortunately, let's talk about one of the performances that might have been a little bit under the radar, a little bit further down the field. The tribulations of the Boost Mobile team have been documented this season. They found things to be a bit of a struggle, and they had a setback on the weekend when one of their drivers couldn't race on Sunday. Richie Stanaway, of course, having a neck injury and having to step aside, and Chris Pither stepping in. And Pither did a pretty good job. On Sunday, he qualified at the back of the pack, and James Golding, his teammate, were qualified 16th. But in the race, Pither just stayed out of trouble, drove sensibly, did a very professional job, and was 14th. And that's equal to the best performance we've seen from that car all season. He was only 4 seconds ahead of Golding. There was a late race safety car, and that kind of stacked the field up. James Golding back in 19th place. My understanding is that Stanaway will get some treatment, and the team is planning on having him in the car in Darwin. And I would suggest that Pither might be there on standby as well. But it's an interesting situation for the team to be in, because there's a lot of upside with Stanaway. He's a guy of tremendous ability. We've seen some of that ability so far in supercars. But when Pither steps into the car on short notice and does such a good job, if Stanaway doesn't seize this opportunity to really step up his performances, some people are going to start to ask questions about what is the long-term future of Richie Stanaway in that team. Pither, the current Super 2 champion, did a fantastic job. This is Golding's golden opportunity, excuse the pun, to step up and be the team leader. But there are some challenges ahead for that team, and let's see which of the drivers comes through and starts to make that team a regular top 10 contender.
We've got a couple of viewers saying that we've been blocked. We can see our stream on, so we're sorry for this, for those people that are still hanging in there. We're just sending messages back to the other guys that are saying they're blocked, but you can see a stream, can't you, Rob? And I can see a stream. I got thumbs up here, and also have thumbs up on that page. And seriously, it's pretty sad. It's pretty sad that we comply with what all of the legislation says, and we get rooted up the arse. To put it bluntly, Philip.
What else happened in Indy Lights, Gerald?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
I'd like to send a cheerio to everybody associated with Indy Lights.
Now, what about this? Chris Wyndham. Running 3 or 4 races across the weekend, and actually started at a USAC race. Well, he started on the road. What's the road to the Future Series with the Mazda Series?
Yeah,
which ran a Road to Indy at Indianapolis Raceway Park, which is down the road from the Speedway, and caught a helicopter from IRP to a nearby speedway, and let's have a look how he went in the USAC wingless sprint cars.
Ouch!
Banged a tyre, and over he went. Just missed getting hit by everyone else along the way. Massive accident, that one. Absolutely car destroying. Let's look at it again in slow-mo, Phil. We see the tyre go. Pretty dry track by the look of it.
Yeah, it wasn't contact at that particular point of the race. May have been contact a little bit earlier in the event, and over he goes. That's 2, 3, my goodness. And the safety features of that car really came into play. Of course, Indianapolis is the epicenter of motor racing. There's so much other stuff going on apart from the 500, and he was lucky to walk away from that shunt. He was
but
a lucky man.
But Philip, he didn't.
Yes.
He hadn't finished there. So,
but wait.
But wait, there's more, because Chris jumped into the Indy Lights car and on the Saturday was actually in the race when this happened. Oh, Friday, I should say.
Went down carb day at Indy and ends up in somebody else's accident, sitting on top of the fence. Well, half the car was sitting on top of the fence. And the two drivers slide to a halt, and that is one destroyed car. And, of course, the safety safari guys there were on the scene immediately to help him out of the car. And, again, the safety features that have been long worked on by everybody associated with that series have done their job. And he's sitting there in the car. What happened? I don't know. I just got here.
And he went out and raced again that night.
In something else.
At Indianapolis Raceway Park down the road.
Bring me another car.
He went back to the road to the Indy deal. So... Quite amazing. Now, the 500 itself, Philip, and everyone at home, if you've got some questions and you sat up to watch the 500 or Monaco or whatever, let us know. Let us know what you thought. John Mostini, bugger, I'm having withdrawals already.
From what?
Well, John was the starter at the Calder Park Thunderdome.
Oh, of course he was. Oh, he was. Of course he was. Hello, John.
Always stood up there in the box and waved the flags around.
We've talked about what great nights they were before on the Motorsport Show, and it really was. And look, there's a lot of people out there who were at the Thunderdome for all those years, including us, and they're still bouncing around the sport, and they still have great memories. And the tails get bigger and bigger. How many titles did Brad Jones win? 73 in a row or something like that?
Yeah.
5 Oscar titles.
Yeah, and 5 and a NASCAR title.
And then he went super touring racing. Let's talk about what happened prior to the Indy 500, because some of the big stories happened before the race even started on Sunday. And one of those involved McLaren and Fernando Alonso.
No.
Oh, first off, there were a number of shunts during the week, and this is Felix Rosenqvist, the young rookie driver in his first season with Ganassi, and tagged the outside of the wall, just lost the rear of the car and bounced back on the infield. He was perfectly all right. The Ganassi guys were able to get their car ready for the 500, and Rosenqvist had quite a strong run and spoke glowingly about the event after his first 500, even though he didn't finish. But again, the safety features of that car, which were largely developed in partnership with Dan Weldon, doing their job and keeping him away from anything serious apart from a trip to the infield medical centre for a checkup.
Now, the big news of the Indy 500, massive event every year and huge crowds this year. But the news was in the week prior, and between our show, after our last show, before the race, and it was the two-time Formula One world champion and second-time Indy 500 entrant, Fernando Alonso, not qualifying, and a myriad of issues. But let's have a look at how he went in practice, and this really started the major dramas. The accident was a turn number 3 or 4, wasn't it? Turn number 4?
And and the McLaren entered car in partnership with Carlin, tagged the outside wall and hit the inside. Again, Alonso taken to the infield medical centre and cleared. And then the problems started. And Zach Brown, the boss of McLaren, has been in the media documenting what happened with the team. And it really was, Gerald, a myriad of mistakes by a team that you would expect better from.
But of course, on that particular issue, there was a guy in the pits, and he had all of the inside running on why that accident happened. Let's have a listen to that.
Telling it like it was. Telling it like it is. Larry Perkins back there from 1999, 20 years ago.
We had audio on that, Rob, did we? No. Well, young bloke, cold ties up.
Yeah, something like that. So Larry calling it like it was. And look, Alonso, it's not the first mistake he's made at the Brickyard. It's not going to be the last. But there was a litany of mistakes from the team, from McLaren. The spare wasn't ready because it had been in the paint shop. It was the wrong shade of orange. It wasn't so much that it needed a respray. It's just it wasn't the wrong shade.
It was the wrong shade of papaya.
Papaya. So they brought the car
It
out.
could have been a tad ripe or a tad overripe.
So it took them too long, basically, to get the spare car up to race spec. And that's why they had problems.
The steering wheel?
6 cars on bump day looking for an opportunity. Yeah, the steering wheel. First of all, McLaren Electronics were going to build their own steering wheel. Then they didn't have one ordered from Cosworth in time. And there was all a bit of a rush. They made the last half-hour session before before the 6 cars went for their final 3 grid spots on bump day, on the Sunday before the race. And they didn't make it, but somebody did.
Huge news, wasn't it, really? I mean, but, you know, we had all of that discussion a couple of weeks before about the big teams wanting to be guaranteed entry into the field and, you know, the privateers and the like saying, well, hang on a second, it's the Indy 500, we all want to have a go at it. And just to show you what it meant, the big guy, Kyle Kaiser, Indy 500, came out and had a practice crash
in the wall, and look at the safety features of that car. Once again, you can see it here. You can see there's a hole in the underbody of this car which is designed to let the air through and keep the car from flipping, and that's exactly what it did. So Kyle Kaiser, 23 years old, first time at the Brickyard. You would have to say a pickup team. Look at the lack of sponsorship on that car, and at that stage, the team was facing an uphill task to get their spare car ready for the bump session, to try and get one of 3 spots in the field. They worked for 40 hours straight to do that, and it was one of the great stories of the Indy 500 before the race even went green. Let's see, we've got the next video there, Rob. And here he goes, and listen to what he says.
Can we hear this, Rob? No audio.
Did we make it?
We made it. Yes, we did. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Yes, we did. Awesome job. Awesome job. Guys, good guys. Oh, my God. I'm in the Indy 500. Amazing. Thank you guys so much. Thank the Lord.
I don't think he said, well, I don't know if he said thank the Lord. There's every chance he did. The Yonkos team there doing a fantastic job. And that also highlighted another problem that McLaren had during the course of their run. They had the wrong ring gear in the car. So the car should have been geared for 229 mile an hour laps. It was geared for 227.5. So even though Alonso basically had the car pinned all the way around, it wasn't fast enough. And a small team with virtually no sponsorships at that point made the field in the 500. The big McLaren team, who probably spent more on corporate hospitality than Yonkos had in their entire budget, didn't, and went home, didn't try to buy a grid place to get into the race. And then it all came out. Bob Fernley, the team manager, parted ways with the team the following day, and Zach Brown came out and basically detailed exactly what had gone wrong. And Gerald, that's not often something you see in motor racing.
No, absolutely not. And it was great, the honesty of Zach Brown to come out. We a bit of a local connection we had there. Charlie Ping, who's not even Chinese, Seinfeld.
Thank you.
He's Donna Changstein's cousin.
Righto, got that. Next thing we'll be getting emails from the producers of Seinfeld.
Well,
for using their dialogue.
Well, it's a joke.
We're commenting.
So Charlie Ping was actually over there working with Carlin on the Alonso car, and not a well-known here in Australia name for Charlie Ping, an American guy who's actually came out to Australia as Pratt & Miller's representative, and a very smart technical guy. He's actually on the way back from the US right now for the next Supercars race. Lives in Melbourne. But he was working with Carlin for the month of May.
And he does some work in Supercars for the Jones team. Is that right?
And a couple others.
Yeah.
Holden teams.
Ran up and down the pit lane. Now,
Holden teams.
Let's go back to the McLaren situation. And people have talked about this, but there's something I want to bring up, and it's this. It's as I said before, it's not often you see somebody like Zach Brown in that situation actually detail what went wrong with the team during the month of May, all the mistakes they made. But what Zach has done, I think, is very clever. And I'll get your take on this because you were in the PR business for a long time. That what he's done is he's made the McLaren situation part of the narrative for next year's race. Regardless of what they do, and I think they'll be back, but they haven't announced that, so let's leave that to them. When people start to talk about Brickyard 2020, when Penske and Pagenaud go back to that race, they'll be talking about what's McLaren going to do. And will they go? Probably. Will they go with Alonso? Maybe and maybe not. And let's look at the situation from Alonso's point of view, because he's already stated, and everybody knows why he's doing this, because he wants to win the Triple Crown. He's won Monaco, and he's won Le Mans 24-hour race with Toyota, and he might win it again this time around. But you look at what Zach Brown has done, And if you're promoting the Indy 500 and you're promoting the NTT IndyCar Series, do you want to see McLaren go back and take on the teams? But do you also want to see McLaren go back and race against Alonso next year?
I'd like to see him with McLaren again.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'd like to see him with Ed Carpenter.
Yeah. Well.
He's not going to get a Honda. The Honda's not going to give him anything. I doubt it. Well, maybe they'll give him a motorbike.
Well, the deal was done this year for Chevrolet, and he drove with Cadillac at Daytona and won that race.
Yeah.
And it was all wrapped around trying to win Daytona and then jumping into the Chevrolet-powered IndyCar for the 500 and going better than what he did a couple of years ago where he led the race. And I had the pleasure of being there that weekend, and the reaction from the fans was amazing. So really, really sad. Let's have a look at the race highlights. These people don't block us, that's for sure. They actually know, and we should say that their race is on free-to-air TV as well all the time, and more than 5.5 million people tuned in the US alone on the NBC with Lee Diffie. But Simon Pagenaud led from the start, and we had a couple of early yellow flags. Colton Herter was the first one on lap number 3. Now, here was a bit of a drama going on later in the race, Phil, with Alexander Rossi, the winner of the 100th Indy 500, had a drama in pit lane while the Arrows car did as well. But the fueling didn't happen for the guys. And see Rossi getting very mad indeed.
Which is not something you see. He's one of the calmest guys around. And look what it did.
Then he cracked it. Yeah. He got blocked. And have a look, he's given the bird at 220-odd mile an hour. Then we had the accident here, Sebastian Bourdais and Graham Rahal with, 22 laps to go. This changed the race because at this particular point in time, the Chevys weren't going to make it. Pagenaud was not going to make it on fuel, and this is what happened. Rahal felt that he got squeezed a bit. He had a bit of a remonstration with Bourdais
before the cars even came to a stop, and Rahal felt like he was in position to challenge for the win. And then we saw this, Rossi goes to the lead in the Honda-powered car, the Andretti entry, and it looked for a while like he was going to be on for 2 in a row, but look at the speed of that Penske. That is just night and day. Drove around the outside with a lap to go, held on for the checkered flag in Pagenaud. And look, it's a great story because
Jean Gerard.
it was 3 months ago. There are people out there saying, is Pagenaud going to have a long-term future in IndyCar racing because he had pretty much a disastrous 2018. And the guy people were connecting with the drive at Penske in that car was Rossi. But Pagenaud swept May. He won the road race in the wet, passing Dixon around the outside. Beat Carpenter to pole, and there he is doing his best impersonation of Frosty the Snowman, pouring milk over himself to win the Indy 500. And there are suggestions that he's signed a deal for Penske. I wouldn't be surprised if that's announced this weekend in Detroit because that's Roger's home turf. Roger Penske does not penalise drivers when they win the Indy 500. He's a man who believes in gratitude and loyalty, and I think you'll find that Pagenaud is going to get a new 2-year contract to stay with Team Penske.
So he should.
Yeah, he drove a brilliant race. Now let's talk about some of the other performances because Rossi was fantastic. He will win more 500s, and he looks like the American driver who's going to be taking the fight for that championship to the foreigners. But a great comeback from Will Power.
One of the things that Rossi said was that once you win it once, you just want to win it again.
Yep.
Will Power, unfortunately, had a drama, just slid into the pit bay and just touched the refueler who was moving towards the car. They put him back to the back of the line on a restart. That basically killed his chances.
He was a lap down, but he came back stronger to finish 5th.
Came back fantastic and finished 5th, and had there was something else happened, and he possibly could have been better off even again. But he was terrific, and 2 years in a row he's done a great job. And Kyle Kaiser, who we spoke about earlier, living the dream and qualifying. Let's have a look what happened to him in the race. Unfortunately, the dream turned into a bit of a nightmare, and he did stick the, was it the Junkos?
Junkos car.
The Junkos car into the wall. Looking decidedly different, Philip, from when they qualified with no sponsors.
A lot of sponsors. So, maybe they weren't paying a lot of money, but they had a lot of sponsors, and that's great to see. And just disappointment all over the, I was going to say all over the face, but we can't see his face, but it's all over his helmet. You can see from the body
Bit
language.
of a shake there of the helmet. There it is. He just lost the back of the car himself and turned it round, unfortunately, and tried to turn it into a bathtub. Now, for Aussie fans, James Davison.
Yep.
What a
Melbourne's own.
Melbourne's own James Davison,
Miami's
son
own
of former Sandown promoter John Davison.
Yep.
Brilliant effort. Qualified 15th.
Easily. He qualified. No one even talked about him in qualifying because it was such a convincing performance. There was nothing much to say. It was just brilliant.
Yeah, he was terrific and raced well. He did have a bit of a drama during the race, though, and it's turned out that it's a faulty pit lane pit limiter. If we have a look at that one, and here he goes. Helio Castro Neves was in the slow lane originally. It was a bit funny, and then when they crossed over, he gave James a tag, who looked like he was going to miss anyway, the pit stall. So a bit of errors, and I'm sure that the faulty pit limiter caused him a little bit of a drama there, and probably
even if that didn't actually mechanically affect he was having to cope with something unexpected in the pit lane, and these drivers are so attuned. You can see it here from a different angle. Davison trying to get across and maybe slowing down in front of Castro Neves, and that wheel bouncing around, thankfully without injuring anybody.
Or going over the wall.
Yeah, or going over the wall. Though there was an incident in the pit lane where one of the mechanics ended up with an injured leg. But Davison was 2 laps down after that incident, and I think it was a subsequent penalty right at the back of the field. And he quietly, under the radar, howled back through the field and got himself back on the lead lap and finished 12th. And that is a fantastic performance. And if there's any Australian sponsors out there looking for an opportunity to do some motor racing in America, you've got to say James Davison's got the runs on the board at the moment. Famous name, so he's going to get plenty of publicity in Australia. But doing a fantastic job, now based in Miami, putting together his own deals and basically joining forces with a team for a once-a-year outing at the Indy 500 and flying the Aussie flag and the brilliant colours on his helmet, the Tony Gaze colours on his helmet, looking absolutely fantastic.
And the big news of after the race, the money.
Yeah, tell us about the money, because we were talking about this before, and you've got a much better handle on this than I do.
Yeah, so the prize pool's actually, it's paid by the Speedway, so Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Yep. No one knows how they mix it up. Right. No one, I can't work it out.
So there's no formula?
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
We do know the prize money went up slightly. It went up by 12 grand or something over last year. And Simon Pagenaud won 2.669 million US.
I thought you were going to say euros.
And he probably copped about half of that, I would suggest, and plus a bonus or two. The team would have shared in a fair bit of money. Now, Colton Herter, who we spoke about, that brought out the first yellow on lap number 3, and that was the end of his day, he finished with $351,000. Not bad.
Pretty good.
For 3 laps in the race.
He was out early.
Davo got 220. So he did 200 laps and earn $131,000 less.
I don't understand that.
Right, so then they go, maybe because Herter got into the top 9, the fast 9 for the shootout for pole. No, but hey, let's go down. Zach Veach started in 28th position, crashed on lap 176 when the Bourdais and Rahal incident happened, finished 29th, was ruled to have finished 29th and won $334,000 US. So
that's more than Davison.
$114,000 more for finishing 17 places lower and starting 13 places lower.
And he didn't lead any laps.
Probably not.
And he didn't run inside the top 10, which Davison did early. On lap 5, he was 9th.
Yeah. So if anyone actually knows, if you want to let us know.
If anyone speaks American.
Yeah, we'd be loving to hear of that. I don't know what's happening with our questions today, Rob. I think we got screwed when we got screwed on the questions, mate. And
so we're not getting questions out here at the moment.
No, it doesn't appear that way, mate. So,
might be the weather.
I don't know.
6 degrees. It's 6 degrees.
We're streaming fine. There hasn't been any buffering, I don't think, has there, Rob? No buffering. Anyway, so that's it for the Indy 500 for a year.
Yeah, sets up a brilliant race for next year, and of course the next round of the NTT IndyCar Series is in the bumpy roads of Detroit, Michigan, this weekend. They go from the fastest track on the series to one of the slowest.
Right.
Will might be hard to beat around there. And of course the results of that race, Pagenaud right up there in the points, and Rossi close behind him. We're reading Facebook here on the telephone.
Righto, we're going to keep going, but it appears as though that supercars have blocked us, Philip, totally.
Okay. All right.
So let's finish off the show about Formula One.
Yeah. Let's talk about Monaco, the jewel in the crown, the race everybody wants to win. And we've got some stuff to talk about after that as well. But, Rob, please tell us we've got vision for Monaco. Oh, there we go. That's the Principality. That's not the Brickyard. Mercedes-Benz on the front row of the grid. And just have a look at the very quick thinking here of Charles Leclerc going across the chicane. Started at the back of the grid after a stuff-up in qualifying. That's the only word for it, from Ferrari. And the regular nose-to-tail action you see at the Principality like nowhere else. And that's lap one, cars making light contact with each other. And traffic is always going to be a problem, but Lewis Hamilton leading away from his teammate Valtteri Bottas, who dominated until qualifying. Leclerc was really anxious. He was really keen to make time early, challenged when perhaps he might not have been advised to do that. And then there was another traffic jam at the Rascasse involving a number of cars, both Williams in that one, and there's Leclerc again. It is Leclerc. And just look at the tyres on Lewis Hamilton's car, wearing a red helmet in honour of his mentor and team co-principal or team chairman, Niki Lauda. And the race was on. Now, Lewis had the lead. Max Verstappen second in the Red Bull with the Honda engine, of course. Let's not forget that. Honda making a comeback. And late in the race, it was well and truly on. But what was hanging over Verstappen's head was a penalty for an earlier incident in the pits. He got close enough to challenge and couldn't quite make it through. Checkered flag number 3 for Lewis Hamilton at the Principality. Verstappen second on the road, but with that 5-second penalty, drops back to 4th place. Lewis Hamilton win number 77 in his career, ironically the number of his teammate Valtteri Bottas. And the World Championship situation, Hamilton is on 14,000 points. No, he's not. Hamilton's on 137 points, Bottas is on 120, Vettel 82. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes-Benz have dropped a point. They dropped a point. In fact, they dropped 3, Gerald. They're down to 257 and 139 to Ferrari, 110 to Red Bull. So you can shut the door so far as the Constructors' Championship is concerned. Looking very good for...
No, I was going to say it's boring as supercars, but it's not.
No, it wasn't a boring race. We must try and be nice. We must be very...
Less boring result than supercars.
Now, there was a lot going on behind the scenes.
Was it? What was happening?
Right. And one of the talking points of that race was that all the Hondas finished. And all the Hondas finished in the top 8. Max was 4th, Gasly was 5th, Kvyat in the Toro Rosso was 7th, and his teammate Alexander Albon was 8th. So if Honda get back on top in Formula One, I think Monaco 2019 is the race people are going to be talking about, where they really showed their hand for the first time. At the same time they were going up, Renault really struggled. Carlos Sainz was 6th in the McLaren, that of course has a Renault engine. Danny Ricciardo was 9th, and a great drive from Ricciardo, but a hopeless strategy from Renault. Lando Norris in the other McLaren was 11th, and Nico Hülkenberg was 13th. But the gaps were what was telling, even though there was a safety car to close the cars up. The gap from the leading Honda to the leading Renault was 48 seconds. And Renault they are in a rebuilding phase, and they are talking a very good game. But McLaren was miles behind last year, and with a Renault, their first year with a Renault engine, and this year McLaren is making them look like donkeys. There was a chance that Ricciardo was going to be at McLaren in 2019 before he signed the Renault deal, and now you would have to say, was that the right decision?
You reckon?
Well,
is it too early?
I think there are hopes that Renault will pick it up, but at the moment they don't look good, and we know Ricciardo's fantastic at Monaco, and their strategy just put him in a situation where he just couldn't fight. So look, Canada in a couple of weeks.
But that's not it. Car performance-wise, he was in front of them to start with, right?
Yeah.
So that's not a car performance problem.
It's a strategy problem.
Yeah.
That's the team. And when you look at what Mercedes-Benz is doing and ticking every box, Renault's not doing that. They're not making the most of their opportunities. And I suspect one of the most frustrated people in that team might be Alain Prost. And maybe Alain Prost is the person they need to listen to about getting their strategies right. And don't forget, Canada next. And that's when Ricciardo won his first race. He's been very strong there traditionally. So we're looking for more from Renault, and they have to be ahead of McLaren, and they have to be right there with Toro Rosso when they get to Montreal in a couple of weeks' time.
Well, let's hope it does turn out better for our boy Dan. Now, a couple of the other things as well. What about this little bit of vision too? There was a crazy incident. This is a different view. That's how close Sergio Perez went in the team formerly known as Force India.
We've got to
cleaning up a couple of marshals.
That's right. That's what most people refer to that team as now, the team formerly known as Force India. Now Racing Point. And look, we're making light of that situation, but that was terrible. That was just terrible.
What were they doing?
There was debris on the racetrack. That's when the safety car came out.
Caution on the speedway.
There was caution on the speedway, and nobody wants to see carbon fibre on the racetrack and see it again. And but they should not have been on the track. And look, Monaco has very, very good marshals. They have a very high standard of training their marshals. But somebody really screwed up then, and there will have to be some sort of investigation into what happened. That could have been catastrophic. One of the most famous incidents in Formula One history happened to Kyle Army when a marshal was killed, and nobody wants to see that again. Of course, we've had a marshal killed, Graham Beveridge, all these years ago at the Australian Grand Prix. Nobody wants to see that, so thank goodness everybody lived to fight another day. But that's a bad situation.
Bloody oath. Bloody oath. Very, very sad. Now, that's probably it from Monaco. Aside from the fact that what an occasion, a celebration of life when we lost Niki Lauda in the week leading up to the race. And,
we did.
The outpouring of emotion.
It's been gigantic, and it's been Niki.
It was 6 p.m. news here, like early in the news.
It was maybe Senna's death in '94 was such a huge news story, but Niki Lauda passing away at 70, and look, a man of 70 who had a kidney transplant and a double lung transplant in the last few years, dying of ill health, is not that something that's absolutely unexpected. But Niki just seemed to be absolutely indestructible for obvious reasons, and the story of his comeback from his accident in 1976 in Germany is one that is storied, not just motor racing terms. It's one of the great stories of sport. It's one of the great stories of life. That the fact that this guy he wasn't staring death in the face. Death was staring him in the face, and he came back, and he was successful, and he was such an iconic person in the sport. And look, there's an angle I want to put on this, and I've been looking at what everyone's been saying, even up till the last 24 hours. People like Martin Brundle's written a piece, and I encourage you to find it online on the Sky News website, Sky Sport website in the UK, about what he's written about Niki Lauda and what he meant to the sport and racing against him when their careers overlapped in 84 and 85. And Niki became justifiably one of those people who was known as the man who could manage any situation, the man who could manufacture wins from nowhere, and the man who used his head so far as winning his world championships was concerned. But he won his first world championship in 1975 with Ferrari. When he went to Ferrari, it was a shambles. He went there, Luca Di Montezemolo went there as a team director, and Mauro Fulgieri went there as a technical director. It was his second stint at Ferrari. And those three people turned the team around in much the same manner as happened much later when Michael Schumacher went there with Ross Brawn and Jean Todt. They performed similar roles to what had happened back in '74 when Lauda started to influence that team. But let's take a snapshot of Lauda's career, because he was known as the thinker. He was known as the man who outraced everybody. From the start of 1975 to his accident in '76, there were 23 Grand Prix he drove for Ferrari. In those 23 Grand Prix, he was on pole 12 times. He won 10 of those races. In 6 other races, he was on the podium, and he had 6 fastest laps. Niki Lauda was the fastest driver in the world. He was Ayrton Senna. He was Gilles Villeneuve. He was the guy nobody could get near. Now, if his career had ended in Germany, let's imagine that he survived, but he wasn't able to come back to Formula One. People would talk about Niki Lauda as the great lost talent of Formula One, the man who had all the speed in the world, all the talent in the world, and how many races should he have won? And it so happened that he did come back. He won the championship in '77 with Ferrari, and then he went to Brad.
Ronnie Peterson or Gilles Villeneuve.
Oh, look at the opposition!
Yeah.
Look at the opposition he raced against.
Yeah.
That was James Hunt, that great battle in '76 when Lauda came back. Jody Scheckter was in Formula One. He won the championship in '79. If Lauda hadn't had that crash, he would have won the 76 title. He won the 76 title. He would have been three-time world champion. He wouldn't have won in 78. Mario was going to win in 78 no matter what. Lauda would have won in 79. So in 1979, he would have been a four-time world champion. He would have done what Lewis Hamilton has just done. Even if he retired then and came back with McLaren, he would have won that championship, I believe, in 84. So we're talking about a five-time world champion. We're talking about a guy who would have been the best driver in the world for a long period of time. He probably drove more conservatively when he came back, and that's what led to his reputation of being the guy who thought everybody. But boy, in 75 and 76, just that snapshot, he was the best by miles, and people don't talk about that.
R.I.P. Niki Lauda.
And let's not forget he came here in 84 to drive in the Australian Grand Prix.
At
Calder Park.
The former Centre of Australian Motorsport, Calder Park Raceway.
And he drove a Formula Pacific car, and he hadn't driven that type of car since '71, since he was racing in Formula 2. And the cars had moved on a lot of his ground effect. It was completely different. And Lauda admitted afterwards, he came out for the money, the amount of money that Bob Jane offered him. He came out for a holiday because he just won the World Championship and he wanted somewhere with nice weather. And there was an air show in Melbourne. They're the three reasons he came out. He was not interested in that race until it started. And he and Keke Rosberg coming from the middle of the pack, howling down the leaders until they got hooked up with somebody else. There was a big accident. I think Terry Hook was involved. And Lauda was out on the spot. But he was going to run down. He was going to run down those leaders, and he was going to be a factor in the finish of that 100-lap race at Calder in a car he'd never driven before. Absolutely fantastic.
And who's ever going to forget those fantastic lines on Hey Hey It's Saturday?
What?
He was in the what do you call it? In the psyche, or he's part of the vocabulary.
He was,
or the pronunciation.
You'll have to speak up.
Yeah.
Later today, it'll be on the news tomorrow. Niki Lauda's being laid to rest in Austria, and he's going to be buried in his Ferrari race suit. Race suit.
Not his car.
No, not his car.
No. A great man, and and perhaps fitting that the movie Rush was made in the last few years, 4 or 5 years ago, that portrayed him and James Hunt.
Yeah,
but it
misrepresented their relationship anyway.
Yeah, maybe, but at least it refreshed people's memories, and for those that didn't really understand who he was, it gave them the knowledge about what he did. Probably far more realistic than the Brock TV show, which was light entertainment.
Not quite as good as Driven.
No, not as good. If you coin, Phil.
If you want to know, if you want to know more about Niki Lauda's career and some insights into what made him tick, there's a series of YouTubes. It's nothing to do with us, and it's not going to be blocked.
Supercars aren't going to block it.
No, you can watch it. Graham Bensinger, the American video journalist, fantastic series of interviews he did with Lauda over the Spa weekend last year. Find it online. Give yourself a couple of hours. There's quite a few videos to go through, and it's just a brilliant insight. And let's not forget Mercedes-Benz on the weekend with their their little silver stars on the back cover of the car. Yeah. One red star.
One red star, and that's the way it's going to remain
forever. Yeah. Fantastic.
So let's toast to Niki.
I would if I could. Good on you, Niki, and thanks for contributing so much to the sport for someone who grew up with square eyes watching it. It was a great ride.
Absolutely. Hey, Philip, that's about it.
Yeah, it is.
We've run through everything. I'm not sure how many people have got to watch us. It doesn't say a lot. We're sorry. We'll be recording something as soon as we finish this. We're going to put it up too. Next show, Wednesday, 12th of June.
There's
8:30 p.m.
There's a lot coming up.
TCR has just become our favourite sedan category in Australia. Great news coming out of TCR. David Wall Racing have bought another 2 Hondas.
Yep.
So a 4-car Honda team. So
could be on the grid at the next race, which is Phillip Island
this weekend. This weekend?
Is it
This weekend.
this weekend?
Yeah, this weekend, I think. Or next weekend, one of them.
I got things on this weekend.
But TCR has just become our favourite category in Australia. And
Don't know what to say, Gerald.
No, and NHRA goes into a four-weekend race program. Winter Nationals are coming up at Willowbank in a few weeks.
IndyCar Detroit, Formula One Canada, MotoGP Mugello. World Superbikes coming up. Great news out of the UK overnight, by the way, that Scott Redding's going to have a one-off in World Superbikes on a Ducati, on a Paul Bird Ducati.
Wow.
In July.
Wow, fantastic.
Redding versus Alvaro Batista on similar bikes.
Awesome.
Should be fantastic.
Yeah.
But there's a lot going on in motor racing, and we'll have that for you in 2 weeks, on the 12th.
All right, we look forward to seeing you then here on the Motorsport Show. Look forward to your company next time. Thanks for joining in, and thanks for nothing, Supercars. That fucking sucks.